Many of you will know that from time to time, in fact, at quite regular intervals, I invite a special guest to come here and talk with me, and so that you can meet that guest and hear a wider community of people speak to us. A few weeks ago, I had here the former Archbishop of Adelaide, Ian George, an old friend here, and he spoke with us. And today I'm having another person with some connection in Adelaide, at least from the past. Dr. Stephen Koski is here today amongst us. He was my assistant here in St Michael's 25 years ago. 25 years ago. He stepped off the plane from Chicago at that time as a very young man. He's not that old even yet, 25 years older today. But and he came here as his first church appointment. From having put in a couple of years here, he then went to Adelaide. Indeed, the groundwork for that to take place was done. The groundwork was done, of course, with some involvement from myself, but chiefly, of course, from the people in Adelaide, no less than Mr. Owen Bevan, who at that time was a very senior person within the South Australian Police, and also a very senior person within one of the congregations, Broughton Place congregation in Adelaide. And it so happens that he is here in the church today, together with his wife. Would you welcome him, by the way, while he's here? Always a pleasure. His great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather? Great, was it? His portrait hangs up behind, at the back of the church, ground floor, always to remind me of one of my predecessors. And it's a very salutary portrait to remind me, I can tell you. So we thank you for that part of our history. But to return to Stephen Koski. So he put in some 10 years as minister at Broughton Place in Adelaide, and also as head of the Cairn Miller Institute in Adelaide. He took a little bit of us with him, and I think he was spent there for some 10 years in Adelaide. Then he went back to Chicago, to a very large suburban congregation in Chicago, where he spent 6 years, I think, there. From that place, he went then to Oregon, which, if your geography is up to it, you'll know that we've now gone right over to the west coast, to Oregon, up top in Oregon, to a place called Bend, where he's been there for 7 years. He is now 7 years. He's now on sabbatic leave, and he's back here in Melbourne, passing through for a couple of days. Would you believe it? He insisted that he should go to an Australian rules football match last night, which he did. And I think he can't speak very well today. He's lost his voice. But we'll hear him in a minute. Stephen Koski, would you come and greet me? Where are you? Oh, here. He's grown quite a bit since then. Those first days, 25 years ago.
Very kind of you to hire a 10-year-old 25 years ago.
Well said. So welcome.
Thank you.
You left your wife and 2 boys at home. Are they still in Chicago? No, they're not in Chicago. Wife is in Bend, we assume. Mm-hmm. And the 2 boys?
As you would have it, I actually dropped my youngest son off at university. He just started university this week in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
That's way over in the middle, isn't it?
Yep.
Yes.
Dead center, actually, where I grew up. Hard to believe. I mean, I'm having a difficult time fathoming the thought that my youngest son started university, and my eldest son just turned 21 this week and lives in California.
He's in California, and the other one's in Montana. Is that right?
Sorry?
One's in California, and
Minnesota.
Minnesota, yes. So welcome. You know, I woke up this morning to a dream. I'd been dreaming of myself in Istanbul, in Turkey. And it so happens that I've been to Turkey, as many of you know, many times. And I thought, what a turning point that was for me to visit Turkey, so different from every other country that I'd been to. And then it led to a number of other international ventures as well. But it was a turning point of quite significance. And I figured that you can finish my sentence, can't you? That your arrival here 25 years ago was quite a turning point for us. What was it for you?
In many ways, it opened a door to a world I couldn't have imagined. 25 years ago, the movie Crocodile Dundee just came out. Do you remember that movie? Being a typical egocentric, arrogant American whose world really just is revolved around oneself, I knew very little about Australia. So having my history lesson of Australia was Crocodile Dundee. But I remember on the plane, I read a book called The Gospel is Not Western. And it was at that moment I felt that I already had a somewhat open mind, that I realized how small my world was, how small the God that I had understood at that particular time, how small that God was. And then you opened up an entirely new world for me as to what that journey might be like and what it might be like to lead others into a journey of expansiveness. So I could go on and on and on, but truly you have said in the past that beautiful scripture where our feet are set in a large place. And 25 years ago, you set my feet in a very large place that just gets larger by the day.
That's good. I thank you. I remember you writing back to one of your friends and saying that when you arrived here, something really did happen, not least that within the first couple of weeks, you walked with me. First, I think it was the Archbishop, then Archbishop of Melbourne, David Penman, visited here. That was one thing. But then a couple of weeks later, the moderator of the Church of Scotland came here at our invitation, an old friend of mine, in fact. But we had to share him with a church across the street. and to do that, we contrived to lay a red carpet across the street. And you and I, escorted, the moderator preached here for a start, and then we escorted him across the street whilst the congregation formed a guard of honour, if you like, and a bagpiper to take us. We wanted to show Scots Church that we owned the bagpipes before they did, because unlike the minister of the Scots Church at that time, I could play the bagpipes and he couldn't. So we marched the moderator of the Church of Scotland across. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember that vividly, wondering to myself, what have I got myself into?
So from there, what's happening in Bend, Oregon? What is that place like?
You know, Bend is actually an unbelievably beautiful place. It's in the mountains, in the river, 10-minute drive. I am walking my dog along the river, and it seems like
Dog? Wait a
dog.
minute. What sort of dog?
Shepherd Husky.
Oh. He didn't learn after all, did he?
No.
There's only one dog. That's a bulldog.
I do understand that.
Go ahead. And so you're walking your dog.
So Bend is beautiful. It's just, you can hike, you can fly fish, you can ski. There's about 90,000 people. It has wonderful culture, music, restaurants.
90,000 people, Geelong size, thereabouts, roughly? Yeah, good size. And what are the people like? Are they all homogenous group, or have you got a mixed group?
You know, one of the things I love about Melbourne, I was sharing as I flew in a couple days ago, it's strange, I think, because I began my vocation here in Australia is the beginning of my married life. My children were born in Australia. I landed at the airport and I took a breath, and it felt like home. I had come home. And one of the things I love about Melbourne is its rich diversity. Bend, Oregon, I would say that's one of the things that I hesitated about moving there. It's growing, has a very large Hispanic population, but it certainly does not have that richness of diversity.
And we'd like America in our midst. What's it now like to have an Australian by adoption living back in America?
You know, when I left Australia to move back to America, a friend of mine said, at the time I didn't quite understand, she said, "You will be a much better American from this experience." At that time I was like, okay.
Was she an Australian saying that?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
That figures, yes.
And it was in going back that I realized, generally speaking, most people just watch one source of news, read one source of newspaper, have one viewpoint by which they base everything, and their world is very small, and it's very American-centric. So it was wonderful for me to have that opened up, and I think it's true. I have a much different view of the world, and America is a scary place right now in terms of its polarization. It's very challenging to build community in the midst of people who refuse to listen to each other, people who refuse to accept that there might be other viewpoints, people who refuse to just extend simple kindness and compassion.
We, of course, like Americans, we seem to feel very much at home with them, but at the same time we're troubled by their violence and by their guns and all of that doesn't seem to have an end, right, does it?
It's truly, I think, individualism gone amok, that such a stress on the right of the individual that I think we've lost sight of the common good, that I may have a right to own a gun, I may have a right to certain things, but what does that mean to the common good? And I think we need to return to a sense that we belong to each other, and that what one does intricately impacts and affects all.
Yes, I suppose too, I was thinking of this kind of dissociation that takes place, that on the one hand, Americans are very strong with certain forms of religion, for example, and we stand back, huge mega churches and fundamentalist churches and Pentecostal churches and so on. All that can exist alongside of a strange dissociation that the religion seems to get lost in that kind of violence or nasty ways of living, where we kill it, or if not kill, we certainly become estranged from each other. Or they do, don't they? You do.
I often want to ask, particularly the most fervent, zealous religious folks, have you heard of Jesus? Have you read the Bible? Have you heard that phrase, love your enemy? Because there seems to be a real separation. Although the fastest growing religious demographic in America right now, in the latest census, is none.
None.
None. No religion.
No religion.
So the box that you check on the census that as to identifying your religious affiliation, by far the fastest growing segment right now is none.
And that I suppose, is a shadow over the churches in a way. That, as you know, my view is that the churches here, I suppose also in America, have lost their way, that they want to impose a kind of religion that nobody's really listening to anymore. And And so if you talk about the values of life, where do young people, not only young people, but we tend to say, where do the growing young people get their sense of values from when the older people have already lost or can't articulate their values? In a few moments' time, I'm going to be talking about loving and hating. And my God, we are terrible at loving and hating, aren't we? Even though we've had years of religious teaching around us. Same with you.
It's interesting, particularly when it comes to young people. Very difficult for us to attract young people to sit and to listen to us talk about loving and hating. It's very easy to attract them. We have a partnership in Guatemala that we work with a particular small community in building houses and smokeless stoves and latrines. And
just a moment, you said Guatemala.
Guatemala in
Yes.
Central America.
Yes.
Very easy to attract young people to just be part. They don't want to talk about it, but you invite me into something that's meaningful, that makes a difference, that makes my life larger. Yeah, I want to be part of that.
So they join your Guatemala habitat movement. Is it the habitat? Yeah. Building houses and.
Right.
And tell us just a little bit more about. Do you take people from your congregation or what?
Yeah, we established a long-term partnership. I had a dream always to not just drop into a place and do good work with that sense of somehow even you're better than the person you're doing the good work for, but to actually go and have a relationship with folks and to realize that I'm going to receive a lot more than I could possibly give in those relationships. So we go to Guatemala twice a year, and we work in a particular small community with Habitat for Humanity International, who predominantly are made up of Guatemalans in terms of their staff. And we don't go in saying, here's what we would like to do. We go and say, how can we join you? How can we be part of this? And so we go twice a year, 25 people, and already next year's groups are already full. And one of the groups, we particularly invite parents with their children and grandparents with their grandchildren. We go in the summertime when school's out so that young people can be part of that. And we build houses, as I said, and smokeless stoves, because most little huts open fire, so there's a particular stove that sends the smoke outside that improves respiratory issues. And we build latrines and water filters, and we sponsor children.
Isn't that magnificent? When you were here, I think you made a resolution that you would not do as I did, that I have always been somewhat glued to my manuscript when I give an address, and I know that you have resolved to throw your notes away and not use a manuscript. So I'm intrigued that you've got a piece of paper in your hand. Were you afraid that I would ask you questions and you'd have to refer to this piece of paper? I'm joking. I know I know what's on the piece of paper, and I'd like you to read it.
Well, I truly, I want to quickly say that I try to emulate you in most ways. It was very clear that I could never match your ecclesiastical elegance, so I don't even try.
And my dress.
So I don't even try anymore. But life is full and life is rich, and I feel blessed to be on the journey that I'm on. And you have played a profound role in that, and I thank you.
Before we go, we had a bit of a joke about dress, you see, that he arrived and I said, "You're going to go to church like that?" So I told him, I said, "Do you realize that a former colleague of yours, namely the Archbishop of Adelaide, when you were there, he came, and do you remember? He was dressed. He asked me, what'll I wear? And I said, you wear the lot. So he wore a hat, the whole business, and you come like this."
Well, you know.
He's going to leave here, and then after he reads this poem, he's going to later go back to Adelaide, where he's going to wander through the Flinders Ranges looking for God.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm actually on a bit of a walkabout. I'm on sabbatical, a 3-month sabbatical. Parker Palmer, who was a person I had the chance to meet and talk with, asked the question, is the life you're living the same life as the life that wants to live in you? And so to me, part of this sabbatical, 25 years, and recognizing my children have now flown the coop, and I am in a place of transition, and new chapters are opening up for me. John O'Donoghue is an Irish Catholic priest, theologian, writer, poet, who not long ago passed from this life to more life. And he spoke in my church in Bend, Oregon, and with his beautiful, beautiful lyrical way of speaking. And he wrote a book called To Bless the Space Between Us. And after he spoke, I said, thank you for being here and being you. And he placed his hand on my forehead, and he said, can I bless you? And he wrote this particular blessing called For a New Beginning. So I'm on sabbatical for 3 months. Every day for this 3 months, I spend, I read this poem every morning, and I spend 30 minutes in absolute silence, hoping the mystery of these words might unfold. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground. Your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit of adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. A new beginning.
You know, I had no idea that he'd read that poem, but it's really quite touching that I've selected a hymn to sing. Don't look just now. Don't look. The words of this hymn, I've got a lot of meeting points with those words. I was touched by them a year or two ago when I attended a funeral of a very eminent surgeon in this city. I'd met him socially on a friendly basis a few times, and I was honored to be invited to to be part of his funeral. And during the ceremony, one of his sons, or maybe his nephew, I can't remember, recited this poem of the hymn that we are going to sing. And I then took the hymn and worked around it to see whether we could get a good tune to it, and we'll sing it in a few moments. But before we do that, would you say, hey, 25 years since he first stepped into this sacred place. 25 years of life has flowed out around him and ahead of him, and he's back amongst us, and we're pleased and proud, all that, aren't we? Yes. Okay.